Many Louisville fans are asking, what's going on with basketball portal recruiting? Well, we brought in an insider to answer those questions. We'll do that on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Joining me today for this special episode, first time on the show, owner/publisher of CardinalSports.com, the Louisville Rivals site, Ty Spalding. What's up, brother?
Oh, not too much, man. Just trying to keep track of the ins and outs of portal season and a little spring football here and there. But no, everything's good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Ty has been a very busy man. Broke some news on Wednesday that we'll talk about. Before we do that, want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. As Ty alluded to, we'll talk a lot about portal recruiting, what's happening this weekend, who will be on campus, some inside information. I guess I should have mentioned that Ty is one of the best insiders in the Louisville market, whether it is sports in general or the recruiting side of things. We'll also talk spring football. Ty, before we really get into the ins and the outs of this weekend and sort of the names that you're hearing, one of my main questions that was quickly squashed by some people in the know was, how was Pat Kelsey going to corral the support from Louisville's boosters? I know that was one of the main points that people were wondering was, how's that going to work? What has sort of been your take on the matter, how he's done? I mean, it seems like he's talked to everyone and their brother 10 times over. How well has he sort of secured some NIL funding outside of Rick Huber's announcement?
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, that was one of the big reasons why I wanted Richard Pitino to be the choice, simply because in today's age, you have to fundraise, you have to have a lot of resources to attract talent. And I thought Richard Pitino would be the best candidate to check that box. So that's where my support from Richard came from for the most part. But now seeing how Pat Kelsey is just running towards this, he's embracing it, and he's really revolutionized what this is all about. And you have some coaches in college who want to say that this is making our jobs harder, that it's ruining the sport. Pat Kelsey's not going to have a woe is me mentality towards this. He's going to embrace it. And I mean, the night that he got hired, he went into one of the more high-end restaurants in Louisville. Several prominent boosters bought his whole family's dinner. The night before, when he made the calls to the list of 8, one of the people on that list was one of the was a more of a Jurge supporter that got kind of brushed to the side when the changing of guard happened. So Pat Kelsey is digging not only to the loyal Louisville boosters, but also maybe boosters that have been on the sideline and maybe been turned off by some of the administrative and leadership changes at the school. He's even digging down in those rabbit holes. So everything I've heard is that the donor base is really, really excited about him. Talked to one booster last week, and they were super excited. So, I mean, for all of my hesitancies about the ability to get behind this coach from an NIL standpoint, I'm really, really optimistic about the Pat Kelsey's ability to connect. And look, these boosters, I mean, look, they don't want to be, they don't want to be wined and dined, but like they don't need to be wine and dine, 5 times a week, but they do expect a little bit of communication, returning texts, phone calls.
You want to know that you care.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing with Kelsey, is that he cares. The boosters feel it. And so I think, you're going to see when this portal class wraps up that, it's an arms race everywhere. I mean, Arkansas is going to have a war chest on there for Cal. So I mean, it's always you're trying to keep up with the Joneses per se. But I think when it's all said and done and this portal class is wrapped up, you're going to see that Louisville made good use of their resources and really put Pat Kelsey in a position to have a successful year one.
You said it's going to be an arms race. I really think that kind of epitomizes where we're at with the transfer portal. Obviously, one of the main reasons, and I don't like to keep bringing up the Kenny Payne era, but I think one of the things that frustrated most fans was that the whole report came out that he didn't utilize all of the NIL funding, that there was some untapped resources there. And, it's been rumored that Louisville has a good amount in the well, so to speak. The Rick Huber announcement, the matching up to $1 million, is pretty groundbreaking for not only this program, but the university as a whole and NIL infrastructure around the country. Where do you see Louisville kind of stacking up? I know that there's been this whole take of Louisville being top 10 for basketball and football. From what you know on your side, what can you tell people that are listening about where Louisville's NIL collective is, maybe compared to some of the other places around the country, and how it fits in?
Yeah, so just an update on the Rick Huber match. The last I heard was that the Louisville fan base has reached that 80% threshold. So $800,000 has been raised, and you add the $1 million from Huber on top of that, so you're looking at 1.8 that's been raised just within the first week of Pat Kelsey being on the job, and so you could potentially get up to 2 million there with the Kieber match, the 1 million from Kieber, and then the 1 million that would be raised to match that. So that would get you to 2 million there. And they had some money raised before the coaching change. So altogether, you're probably looking at somewhere in that 4 to 5 range, as far as just the total amount. And best of my knowledge, just on what players are making at different schools and what they're asking for, I mean, you should be able to field a very good roster, probably 7 or 8 players at a minimum that are quality players. Nationally, I mean, it just keeps changing. It's because everyone just kind of wants to one up the next one. But I mean, outside of a few extreme examples on the football side, and outside of a few extreme examples on the basketball side, I don't think there's a recruitment that Louisville's going to shy away from when it comes to NIL requirements. They are going to be smart about it, though. They're not going to. They're part of being a good coach nowadays is you have to have a little bit of a GM mindset. And Jeff Brom on the football side it did that really well, in my opinion. This past off season, and just the way he sprinkled his resources around the different positions. But so for Pat Kelsey, he has to weigh, do I want to pour this, do I want to allocate this many, this much of my funds in one player? How do I want to spread it out and be, 10 deep, or do I want to go heavy on 2 or 3 studs? And so it's all, that part of the coaching experience factors in a lot nowadays, and a coach's ability to maneuver that. That's just as important as what they do, coaching on the floor, in my opinion. So I think, to answer your question, I think, probably top 10, top 15 around there. And like I said, I mean, Rick Huber's matching, $1 million, up to $1 million. And the last I heard, 800,000 of that had already been raised.
Wow.
So that's a phenomenal response.
Oh yeah.
And I think it speaks. I think there's obviously, you have some heavy hitters, but it also speaks to the everyday fan that you can give $25 a month. And the cool thing for me is, my parents are, they're kind of the generation where, they grew up with, college athletes not being paid, and, having that mentality that, a free room and board and free education, like that's plenty. But I think the cool thing about NIL is, like, even if you're someone that gives 25 a month, you can feel like you're a stakeholder of sorts
Right.
with a team. Like, you could feel like you're a part of, or contributor. Like,
Mhm.
you have an investment
Sure.
in the teams. So that, to me, if you kind of approach it from that way. And another thing is, like, the way I think about it is, if I can give 25 a month, like, that Louisville football season was well worth 25 a month for
Of
me.
course.
The experiences, the Notre Dame game. I would have,
Yeah.
if you would have told me that, if you would tell me that I would have another experience like that this coming fall, I'd probably sign up for a donation right now and say, take my money. Here you go. But I think that's how you got to look at it.
Yeah.
And I think this fan base is, and I get there, it's going to be adjustment period for a lot of people. The mentality is going to have to shift for a lot of people, but I think overall this fan base is really, uh, just really engaging this and really taking it head on, and really
Mhm.
moving in the right direction.
I would agree with everything. I think 502 Circle, what they're doing, Dan Furman and the guys over there, Mark Spiegel, the list goes on of what the great things that they're doing. But I want to get into some of the inside information that you released earlier today. Before we put you on the stand, we'll tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Look, it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing. FanDuel continues to be the place to bet on every game. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. You can bet on everything from slap shots, home runs, slam dunks, all on one app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/locked on. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Continuing on along in this special recruiting episode with owner publisher of Louisville's Rivals site, Ty Spalding. Ty, you dropped some bombs on Wednesday afternoon. It is going to be a huge weekend for the men's basketball program. Just kind of recap what all you've heard and some overall thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the dead period will end, here this week, meaning that visits to campus can resume. And Louisville has lined up a pretty star-studded weekend ahead. And um, just before I get into that, they were able to make their assistant coaching hires official as well. So they'll have a full staff on campus to host recruits. Ronnie Hamilton's a really, really good recruiter. He'll be in town for the visits this weekend. And, for me, I think it's very important. Louisville's going to host two guys that have already committed, and James Scott and Rain Smith. And I think having guys that are familiar with Pat Kelsey, familiar with the system, familiar with this culture, around the guys they're recruiting is a great strategy. I think it can only help. So you got those two commits, and then they're hosting, to my knowledge, at least three more high-profile transfers. Dante Maddox Jr. from Toledo. Louisville has visited the family in Chicago. They visited Dante on campus in Toledo. They've put in a lot of time on this recruitment, and hopefully, that I would imagine their mentality is to not let him leave without a commitment. And so I think, from what I've been told, Xavier and Illinois are in there strong, but Illinois is in on some other big time guards: Kylan Boswell from Arizona, AJ Storr from Wisconsin. They just got a commitment from Trey White last night. So maybe that bodes well for Louisville, but I was told Illinois, Xavier, and Louisville are the primary three there. Really, really prolific guard, can shoot the ball, and that's going to be a common theme with these transfers. Is
Sure.
They're all going to be shooters from the outside, efficient. So Dante Maddox, a guy they've been on for a while, a guy that, as I mentioned, they've seen the family in Chicago. They've visited him on campus at Toledo. It's one that they've been on for quite some time. Chris Youngblood from South Florida, the co-AAC Player of the Year. I was told by a source he will be in town on Friday, and this will be his first visit. I believe it'll be tough to get him to not take any more visits after this, but getting the first visit is never a bad thing. If you can, obviously maybe the last visit you'd probably prefer, but in this case, just getting him on campus is a big deal. 15 points per game, downhill guard, can shoot the three. Just a really good player, and just another guy that I think would take this team, paired with some of the other guys they have, would take them, into a contender, in the ACC pretty quickly.
Right.
And then the last one that I was able to confirm was Nick Boyd from Florida Atlantic. He's a guy that started on their Final Four team a year ago, right around a 10 points per game scorer. And so you're seeing a theme with the visitors is a lot of guards and a lot of guys who shoot the ball really well. I do think there's some things in the works for the front court, but their priority seems to be on the backcourt right now. And with Terrence Edwards Jr. already in the fold, if you can add one or two of these guards that are on campus this weekend, you're feeling pretty good already about your starting five. So yeah, big weekend upcoming for Pat Kelsey and company.
It seems like it's great that the guards have been focused on, because it seems like just didn't recruit guards all that well over the past couple seasons. Won't get into that rabbit hole, but it seems like every video I post about a new guard, there's 4 to 5 comments. What about the big guys? What about the front court? Are we going after big men? We'll be playing big men. I know that you've been adamant that relax. They're going to be fine in terms of recruiting the front court.
Yeah, so I texted my source today, and I was like, "Yo, the people are asking about the front court," and he said, "I posted this on my boards. There's a whale in the hopper. So there's some things lined up, and I think when you hear that from this staff, you don't have to worry about what happened in the past of things never coming to fruition. So there's some things lined up in the front court. And look, I talked to a staffer today, and they said, don't dismiss James Scott either. Obviously, you don't want to bank on him to play 30 minutes a game, but the staff really likes James Scott a lot. They feel like he can contribute this year. So they want people to know that they are working on the front court, but that James Scott is a guy that they feel good about and they like the potential of, and they think he can play for them this year. So I think the front court will come together in time, and I think you'll see the core of the roster in place by Derby.
That's a pretty good timeline. It seems like there was going to be a wave right after the national championship game, and there have been some big time names that have entered. I'm curious though, when it comes to guard play, I would imagine with Kelsey's system, you're seeing a lot of hybrid players at the position, 3 guard situations, probably pretty frequently. With Edwards, Rain Smith already in the fold, there's a couple guys that will be on campus this weekend. Ty, do you think it's a matter of all 3 guards that are on campus? Do you think there's a situation where if all 3 wanted to commit, Kelsey would take all 3? Or is it one of those, well, you're sort of, we'll take who commits first? How do you see the roster kind of breaking down with how many guards Kelsey's looking to take?
Yeah, so this kind of plays into the whole Freddie DeLeon situation.
Mm-hmm.
I know Louisville has a really strong connection to him, and they were linked to him early on. But I think they're going to play a wait and see approach, given
Mhm.
that they have 3 guards on campus this weekend. And kind of to answer your question, I think it's a situation where, there's one of these guys is either going to not have room or he's going to have to come off the bench.
Yeah.
And so I think you just got to figure out, what roles guys are comfortable in. Um, Not everyone you get's going to be a starter, and you do need some role players. You do need guys that are going to be your eighth and ninth, people off the bench. But I think, to me, when you look at the way this stacks up, I don't know if you get say you get say you get Maddox and Youngblood. Um, I think you've got your starting 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
You've got Maddox, Youngblood, Edwards, and then that would leave Rain Smith and either Nick Boyd or Freddie DeLeon to be 2 guards off the bench. So yeah, I would say you're reaching that threshold of the maximum number of guards you'd want to take. So I would probably assume that it's going to be um, a calculated approach, and they want to be smart about it, but I think they want to get the fish in the boat, and get rolling on building out the roster. So, I'd say that they'd be more willing to take, first come first serve mindset. But like I said, I think I think it's a situation where they're just trying to see where guys are comfortable at in their roles. And I think that's why you've seen some of the Freddie DeLeon stuff calm down, um, just because they feel good about some of the other guards that they have on campus. And
Right.
you're getting to a point where you're probably going to be um, okay on guards, and maybe even have a surplus of guards. So I think that's probably where they're at, is maybe whoever jumps on board, let's roll.
That would make some sense. I mean, it's easier said than done having to flip a whole roster. I mean, you have 10 spots left. Not all 13 players are going to be starting level players. And I think it's critical that you talk about there being role players. But not only do you do a great job of, giving basketball input, but also the football side of things. Spring practice is obviously underway, the spring game coming up. I want to give fans an idea of what's going on, how the team looks early on, and such. We'll ask Ty's thoughts here coming up momentarily after we tell you about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Gametime. Look, Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster. It doesn't just have to be sports. You can get last-minute deals up to 60% off for comedy, theater, etc. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Final segment of this recruiting episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Ty Spalding, owner and publisher of Louisville Rivals, also has, like you mentioned, the premium board. So be sure to subscribe to his board for some great insight info. Ty, it seems like for as long as I've been hosting this show, spanning multiple years, you've been on top of things in the football realm. There's a lot of buzz and excitement surrounding this football team. I know it's early. But I want to give a fans a little bit of what to look at. What have you seen early on? I know he's dealt with some injuries that he's been healing back from, but first initial thoughts on the quarterback, Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, I think the staff really feels good about what they have in Tyler Shuck. I think they feel like they got a steal in a sense, just given his injury history, and given his last couple of seasons of not finishing them out. I think from a talent perspective, they feel like they got a steal, and they feel like that his abilities will allow them to call an offense more in line with what Jeff Brom wants to do versus what they did last year. I mean, look, you're just talking to some people after the season. I mean, it was probably pretty evident to everyone watching, but that's not the type of offense that they want to run. That's just kind of what they were. They kind of were confined to that playbook, to restrict the playbook a little bit. I don't think that'll be the case this year. I think they feel really good about Tyler Shuck. They think, like I mentioned, I think they, when you look at, some of the other transfers on the quarterback position, that were considered the top guys in the portal at that spot. I don't think there was anybody really out there worth what their asking price. And I think, going with Shuck and being able to surround him with quality players was the correct route to go. And I think behind him, I think Pierce Clarkson has had some really good moments this spring from what I've heard. I think you're probably looking at a 2A, 2B situation with Pierce and Harrison Bailey. The one open practice I did go to, there was a lot of getting Pierce out of the pocket, using his legs. I would say you're going to see some packages with Pierce at a minimum that's kind of similar to what Evan Conley ran last year. But if you're looking at just from a backup perspective, I think that 2A, 2B with Pierce and Harrison Bailey is probably where things stand right now. But I think they're happy with Pierce's progression, and I think he's shown a lot of improvement over the spring.
It's obviously fairly early. There are a multitude of new guys joining this team, both via the high school ranks and from the portal. Who have been some names that you've heard that have sort of stood out early on that have come from the portal?
Yeah, so they really, really, really like Penny Boone at running back. That dude is the real deal. He came in at 240, I believe. He's down to 224. He played 1 year at 260. So this is a big dude, but Louisville's gotten him down to under 225 pounds. He's a really, really good running back. They really even like Don Chaney as well from Miami. But I think when you're talking about newcomers and who's standing out, I think you look at the secondary. Tamarion McDonald from Tennessee is a guy that they really like. He's had a good spring. And even at corner, I think they're really, really happy with how that position came together. I think you're looking at, obviously Quentin Riley, but you're looking at Corey Thornton and from UCF and Taz from Illinois, Taz Nicholson from Illinois, that three really capable starters at corner. And then Tyon Holloway from North Carolina is a guy that's had a really good spring from what I've been told as well. And him and Aaron Williams are there, capable of playing, but there's just so much depth there that, that's a position that, from what I've been told, Jeff thinks this is the talented and deepest secondary he's ever had as a coach. Up front on the offensive line, I think there's been a couple injuries, so it's hard to really gauge who the starting five is. But I think that from what I've heard, the depth and the size on the offensive line is night and day from last year. There's really not a drop off between the ones and twos. I think Pete Nigra at center's been a stalwart, and I think when you get into the fall camp and get some of these guys healthy, you'll see a starting five, but you'll see probably 7 or 8 guys that can start, and there won't be a drop off. At receiver, Colin Lacey had a little slow start to spring. From what I've been told, the last week or so, he's shown a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, is slowly getting up to speed. But they really need him to step up. And that's a guy that, like I mentioned, they wanted to see a little bit more from as spring ball came to a close. Ja'Cory Brooks has had a shoulder injury, I believe, so he hasn't been live, but he has been participating in some drills. Great talent, great size. And I think that's probably a position where they might look to add another. And I think receiver and I think edge is probably the two positions that they'll probably add over the summer as this next portal window opens up. And I'm trying to think who else. At receiver, the key for that group is, they need one of these guys like Chris Bell, Jaden Thompson, Jimmy Callaway. They need one of those three to really step up and really be a reliable option for them.
Mm-hmm.
Those three are kind of in that same area on the depth chart of, it would be really nice if one of those guys could make a statement. Tight end, I think Jamari Johnson is going to have a big year. Obviously, they haven't gotten Mark Redmond on campus yet, but from who they have now, I think you're looking at Jamari Johnson and Jaleel Skinner as the 1 and 2. With Johnson, he's gotten in great shape. The staff feels like he's ready to go. He's improved a ton. He's bought in from the mental side of things. So there was one point over the offseason where I thought he may be a guy that kind of gets kind of falls as the odd man out of that position, but he's come on strong. At linebacker, I think you're looking at TJ Quinn, but I think that other spot. I think ideally, you may have Stanquan Clark overtake Jalen Alderman at some point, but you have your two starters back, and behind them you have Jarente Davis from A&M, and TJ Capers is playing the will linebacker, the weak side linebacker. So I think he's turned a bit of a corner over the last week and a half or so. So I think everything is heading in the right direction. I think the defensive line, Adonijah Green's been starting on the edge outside of Ashton on the other side, and I don't know if he's big enough to be an every down guy yet. But Tyler Barron is not participating due to a rehab. So yeah, all in all, I think the staff feels really good about the depth. That's kind of been a big message. I think the size is a lot better than it was last year, and I think the speed, Quincy Riley in particular, that was kind of he's kind of a prototype of a guy that they really wanted to get bigger, but also wanted to get faster. So
Sure.
I think just from that perspective, I think they feel really good about where they're at, and I think you're gonna, I think they have some high expectations for this team.
Well, there you have it. I'm really interested to see, what happens in the spring game. It seemed like last season after the spring game, Brom said, all right, we're going to revamp the whole entire line. And I'm interested to see how they can address some of these positions of need. But Ty, man, appreciate you coming on to the show. That's going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. Be sure to follow Ty on Twitter. You can see it in the graphic below. If you're listening to this, it's at Ty Spalding. No spaces there. It's spelled how you would imagine it would be spelled. But also be sure to check out Louisville Rivals, cardinalsports.com. A great premium board over there with constant flow of information on both football and basketball. And it's very, very fairly priced as well. Great inside info. So be sure to tune into that. Follow Ty on Twitter. But we'll see you right back here tomorrow. Y'all, everyone have a great day. Go Cards.